Hey, it's Ben here, and here we're going to have a look at how we animate on text around a circle in Final Cut Pro. So in order to do this, we're going to need to use one plugin, which is the Brett Effects Power Tools Light plugin, which is a free plugin, and that's going to allow us to add our text around this circle and also align the text both inside and outside the circle so you can get the text aligned, as you can see here in the example. So we'll clear our timeline here and begin to work on this from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do here is jump into our sidebar here for the titles and generators, and we're going to scroll up. I have the Brett Effects Power Tools plugin installed here, and we are going to have a look for the text on circle plugin here. So we're going to drag this down to the timeline, and we're just going to modify the text, and we'll have a look at a couple things as we go through this in terms of aligning the text both inside and outside the circle. So we'll just come up to our inspector, and we're going to change our type here. And we have a few controls within the plugin that allow us to align the text. So you can see we've got a text offset here, so we can get that text aligned nicely at the top. And we've also got the text size down at the bottom, so we can change the size and then continue to modify that text offset so we can get it in just the right spot sitting at the top of that circle. We've also got some options for the circle radius, so we can change that. And then also we can change the scale of the text and the circle together here as well. Now, if you're going to position your text in a different location on your video, I'd recommend completing the animation in the center at first as we go through it, and then we can move those elements to a different point in the layout of your design. So that's how to add a text at the top. There's a couple of controls that we don't have within the plugin itself. If we need to change something like the tracking, we have to come into the type controls, so we can modify the tracking, and this becomes particularly important when we're actually adding the text within the circle. So we're going to add a new text on circle here, and for this one we are going to come back to the plugin options here, and then we will align it inside the path. So you can see the text jumps inside the path there, and we can obviously scale it to kind of match the alignment of the text above. We can change the font size, and you can see the text inside the circle. We'll just change the type here. And you can see the type is always sitting a bit closer on the inside of that circle. So we're going to offset this a little bit so it sits nicely at the bottom there. We'll go to our type options, and then in here we can modify that font size, and we can also change the tracking so that text reads a bit better, so it's not overlapping or really scrunched up, as you can see there. So we'll get that nice and aligned, and you'll find when you're working with some plugins, jumping between these different options up at the top in the inspector quite a lot. So we'll offset this just that little bit more, and then to add the circle behind the type here, we'll come up to our titles and generators. We're going to scroll down to the generators and to elements, and then we're going to use the circle shape behind these two text objects. So I'll just drag that down. We'll trim this down at the end here, and up in the inspector for the circle we're going to uncheck the fill. We don't need that. We are going to change the outline color width, and then we'll also change the color of this. So we'll click here and we will choose a different color. Let's go for a nice rich blue. So that's how to get the circle behind there. If you want to modify the scale of the circle, then you'll need to do that in the video options. So we can change the scale of this to match our type, and then we're going to come back to our first type layer, and we'll actually change the color of this type to white so that it sits nicely on top of that, and we'll do the same for our bottom type as well. So that's how to add type along a circle in Final Cut Pro. Now we're going to have a look at how we animate this on. So the first thing I want to do actually is animate on both of these bottom layers at the same time. So I'm actually going to put those into a compound clip. So that is my text at the top that you can see here, turning on and off. Just tapping the V key. And if I highlight this and hold down Shift, I can highlight both of those layers. And I'm going to go to File, New, and Compound Clip, or Option and G. And what this will allow me to do, once they're in a compound clip, is add that transition at the same time. So I'm going to come to my transitions on the right here, and we are going to go down to wipes. So all the way down the bottom we have wipes, and we're going to use the clock wipe here, which is basically going to animate it on 360 degrees. So we'll drag this on to our clip, and we're going to sharpen up the edges here a little bit. So you can see in the clock wipe options, we have some options for the edge treatment. We can change that feather down a little bit until it's a sharp edge. We'll have a little bit of blur there, around 4 pixels. And we'll do the same for the last option here. So we'll change that edge treatment down to around 3 or 4 pixels. And you can see now that animates on nicely. So for the top layer, our Saturday 13th of October, we're going to do the same thing. We'll add the clock wipe on there, and then we'll just offset this a little bit. So they will animate on top and the bottom. We'll change this a little bit more. And I'm going to have this animate on in the different directions. So I'm going to select my clock wipe here, and I'm going to have this animate on counterclockwise, and you'll get a nice animate on and then bounce to the bottom. We could extend that out even a little bit longer. And you can see my text isn't quite aligned there, so I'm just going to change that text offset again in the top here until I get that just right. So we still have the blue lines showing on the circle here from the type. You can actually turn that off. So if we turn that off here, and then to edit the text actually in this top circle where we have it nested in a compound clip, we need to double click on that compound clip, and then we can modify our type within that. And I'm going to turn the circle off here as well. We'll come back, and now you can see we have that type animating on around the circle on the top and bottom using only a free plugin within Final Cut Pro. So if you have any questions about Final Cut Pro, other effects or techniques that you're trying to do, then do leave a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.